Sometimes you need to just take a break and take a step back. In this episode of Crucible, we're going to be doing exactly that. We're going to be taking an intermission after this. Okay, let me start over. Sometimes you need to take a break and just take a step back. In this episode of Crucible, we're going to be taking a brief intermission, and we're going to reflect and look over the past 30 episodes of Crucible with my producers, Ben, Matt, and Myron.
We all face challenges, crucibles in life that make us or break us, and our health is often the biggest crucible we will face. This podcast is designed to help you achieve your health goals through simple, strategic, and proven methods. In every episode, we'll learn about how to overcome your health crucibles and live your best life.
Hello, everybody. This is MaryLee Hand coming to you live from my Dividend studio here in Brentwood, Tennessee for my podcast of Crucible. In this final episode of Crucible, we are not saying goodbye. We are merely saying until next time as we take an intermission. We'll see each other again, my friends, and we will continue to help to support and guide each other through the challenges and crucibles in your lives, to come out stronger than ever together on the other side. Today, I'll be joined by the crew behind the scenes of this podcast, whose voices and faces you may not know, but who have made this podcast a possibility and wildly more successful than I ever imagined. So help me welcome Ben Tompkins and Martin McHugh from Two Brothers Creative. Welcome, guys.
Hi, MaryLee.
Hi, MaryLee.
Hey.
Welcome. So this is the Dividend, huh? I have not formally been in the Dividend. I guess you can consider me being in the Dividend, right?
You live vicariously through MaryLee and that Dividend.
I do.
Yeah, and I need to point out that I'm in Brentwood and they are in Omaha, Nebraska. So we do this all remotely, and it is rather tricky. So
yeah, but it's been a lot of fun.
It has been.
How does the final show? How does it feel? Has it hit you yet, or do you realize, oh man, this is the last episode?
Now I'm gonna cry. Yeah, my husband and I both cried this morning. So, but I'll be back. It's just a matter of time.
Right. Absolutely. So, that's the great thing about the podcast and the Dividend is we can pick it right back up whenever we want.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm planning on.
Great. We do have some questions for you. We'd like to talk about your experience through the podcast, as you've done a number of episodes and you've interviewed a number of guests and you've shared a lot. And we kind of want to pick your brain for some tidbits that maybe stand out to you. Our first question, and Myron and I, we can kind of just go back and forth if we want, but do you have a favorite moment from the show? When you think of the podcast, is there a favorite moment from the show that stands out to you?
Probably the first time I got to see it live on video. So the first time I heard it, I was like, yay, this sounds really good. And I sounded really smooth. And then all of a sudden I'm on video and it's like, oh my gosh, this is frightening because I have no filter on my camera. And this is me in live color. So, but that was really a thrill, honestly, to get to see it as well, and to see it produced so well. You guys do a great job.
Well, it's easy when we have good talent to work with.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it a lot easier. So I would give most of the credit to you.
Oh, well, thank you. We always take out my blunders and that's the great thing. It's not like live music theater or a live concert on stage where whatever I say is, emblazed in people's video cameras forever or their phones. So we can at least edit that stuff out. So that's good.
That's one thing. I don't know if we've ever done like a blooper reel.
I know. It'd be scary. I would love that though. I would absolutely love that. I'd die laughing.
Yeah, Ben's volunteered for that. So
yeah, I can put something together.
What has been your biggest personal breakthrough during this podcast journey?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I think I realized after I listened through season 1, where I'd interviewed 16 or 17 different people and the crucibles that they had lived through. And then my comments back to them, and I kept bringing up about how I'd lost my father when I was 13. And I thought, oh my gosh, I keep talking about this. And I thought, I really need to go talk to somebody professionally about this, because obviously I'm not, over this trauma. And that's probably the best thing that happened to me, because I was able to get into therapy and just, unpack all this stuff from my life. And it's truly, I feel like it's made me a better person for sure. So
In some ways, I don't know if equating podcasts to therapy is a fair equation. Not that, but it is a release in so many ways of, you actually talk about something. And with most podcasts, and you do a great job, and you've done a great job with your episodes of formatting and structuring them, so it's not just get on and wing it. But when you do that, I think that having that structure of verbally talking through things, and then knowing that people are going to watch it, people are going to listen to it, and so you kind of need to be on your game. I think it can be a good release for all kinds of emotions and a good process to work through things.
I would agree. And I think because I do prep ahead of time, and I also research ahead of time. So that was pretty humbling as well, as I'm researching through these topics and going, oh, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that. Oh,
right.
Kind of like, wow, I need to really get it together here. So personally, in my own walk. So
talk about some guests and some guest stories that come to mind. Is there a guest story that has left an impact on you throughout the podcast?
Oh, yeah, there just have been many. In fact, I would say virtually every guest I brought on, left an impact. The first one that came to my mind was Wags, and that's Lee Wagner. He's a great friend of ours, and we've known him as Wags his whole life. But he did a walk to remember, and he talked about the trauma of losing both of his children in a car accident on Mother's Day, and how he was just so distraught and just so in grief that he walked literally from Peachtree City, which is near Atlanta, to North Carolina, to the coast of North Carolina, to where, the newspapers picked up his story, and he had a cell phone, and that's all he had on him. And he just literally walked out of the house and told Debbie, I'll be back. And I didn't know the extent probably of that pain that he had gone through. It was, it's always profound. And I think it's always a parent's worst nightmare is to lose your children. And he lost his whole family. So I don't know, that was, as you can tell, that was very impactful. And
were you kind of prepared for that interview, or did you realize the story that you were about to hear?
I knew the story, and I interviewed all of my guests before I did the actual interview, so that I, knew the details and kind of knew which questions to ask and where to lead them. And this is still back when it was just literally the podcast. And, but man, then he got on and he started sharing, and it was just like, oh, he didn't tell me any of that, so then I felt kind of, caught off guard. It was really tough to keep my composure and not just be sitting there with tears dripping down my face, So
with that story and that essentially an unexpected lesson, what have you learned, or is there anything that you can share of unexpected lessons or tips that your guests have provided that have improved your own health or even faith?
Well, I think that, first of all, of course, looking back, you see how faithful God, at least I have in my own life, how God has been so faithful. And I believe that too with Lee and many of my guests. Pretty much all of my guests that I have had on have been believers, and so it's just that constant reminder that, I'm not alone. I do have God walking by my side the entire time. But also the fact of when people go through trauma, and I mean trauma with a capital T, like a death or somebody that, well, Casey Youngandress shared about how she was beat up by her husband who had PTSD, became an alcoholic, and she finally left him. And, it just reinforced in my own light, especially after going to therapy, how people need to talk to somebody else. They need to go. And as hard as it is to do, it's, that's the healing, and that's the, the peace that can come to your heart as well as your mind and your life. And I know that Lee's gone through a lot of it, Lee and Debbie together. So that was, kind of an eye opener to me, like, wow, I need to deal with my stuff. So
this podcast has been, the overall theme is helping others overcome their crucible. How did that process of helping others overcome their health crucibles in turn help you? Can you think of instances where helping someone else in turn helped yourself?
Yeah. My first thought is Brett Wetton, and I interviewed him about his life, and he shared the clip from Good Will Hunting about Matt Damon. Well, I think Robin Williams says to Matt Damon, "It's not your fault." And that was a key turning point in Brett's life, to realize that all of the stuff that he had gone through, which was equally traumatic in a whole different way, but that really brought peace to me as well. And that's one thing that I've, had my therapist tell me over and over, it's not your fault. You didn't choose these circumstances. And, so that's given me hope personally, and hopefully, my listeners as well.
And so his story and many other stories have more than likely helped influence your own personal health and fitness philosophy. Can you, how have those stories impacted you?
I think truly that as people have shared, and as I've researched and done my solo episodes as well, there's always that huge, and this is the reason I became a health coach, was first of all, to keep me accountable. But I think that's the number one thing that I have gained out of all of this, is just the accountability of, well, if this person can do it, then, I certainly should be able to do it too, as well as just researching and, the faith and fitness, and, going, okay, am I really doing those 5? And it's been like a whole self-improvement process, literally through all these 30 episodes, in a good way. So
let's talk about some of the fans of the show. Myron and I are big fans. You do have other fans. And that's always, I would imagine, I don't have a podcast, but I would imagine that that's an interesting thing when you have people listening to you and reaching out to you potentially and talking about you. And it almost is an immense sense of power that you have. You're communicating with the masses. Can you share a story with us when a fan maybe reached out to you and talked about the podcast, how they're a fan, maybe how it influenced their life?
Yeah, I've actually had two females reach out to me. One of them was my student, and she was literally my next door neighbor when we lived in Geneva, Nebraska. And that's where I taught the longest and where I had a ton of success. But she came to me after my episode on eating disorders, and she shared, oh my gosh, it was just a boohoo moment for both of us. And she shared how she had an eating disorder as well, had been struggling with it. What could I do to help her, with her health? And I had no idea, because I had her as a child. She grew up and eventually graduated, and I had no idea any of that was going on. And I wish I would have at that time. I feel like I could maybe have given her more help. But she said, you were always the person that saw me. You always saw me in the classroom. And she says, otherwise I was just invisible. And so I was like, that was really awesome. And ironically, the house that we lived at, she lived, one way to the left of our house. And then to the right side of our house was another neighbor. And I actually taught with her, and she's a teacher as well. And she had come to me and said, all right, now, MaryLee, tell me all about this health program you're doing, because I've listened to all your podcasts, and I want to do this. And I was shocked, because I hadn't talked to her in probably, I don't know, 15 years. So that was really neat, and a really neat, kind of reconnection. So,
yeah. So your podcast is full of great advice for anyone to get not only on the just overall health journey to begin with. What out of all your guests, what is the most profound piece of advice that they've ever given you on your show?
Interesting. I think when I had Vernon Dub Davis, he's one of my best friends and a great coach friend. But he talked about how grateful he was, and how people needed to be grateful for their, because he had lost 100 pounds. He was an alcoholic. He literally just quit drinking. He became a vegetarian. This guy is totally ripped. He's not even 50 years old. And he had shared with me, he always calls me MaryLee, MaryLee, you need to be grateful, and I thought, wow, exactly. And he says, how do I know these people? He'll always say that too. How on earth did I ever meet you? And it's always very humbling, because it's, I, like everybody else, take a lot of things for granted, and being happy and being grateful. Yeah, that should be number one on, I think, everybody's list, to be thankful for. So,
we've talked a little bit about some pretty significant crucibles that some guests have talked with you about. Can you elaborate more on maybe some guest or one guest that you had a deep emotional connection with as a guest, or maybe you didn't have that connection before, but then after they came on the show, on the podcast, you felt a deeper emotional connection with them?
Yeah, for sure. Casey Young Andreas came on, and I shared a little bit about her story. Her husband, she got married young. She had children young. Her husband went off to Iraq, and he came back a whole different person. And he had PTSD. He just was in the depths of despair, at the bottom of a bottle, and he was an alcoholic. And I had, no clue. And Casey and I, she actually is, she runs the cleaning company that comes to my house. And so we'd had an event, this is back in 2021, and she came and she had her cleaning crew here, because it's still kind of, everybody was leery about COVID, and this is going to be a whole in-home, kind of an experience. We had about 40 people here. So she had her crew here, and she was here, and she was cleaning and just serving, just like, her fabulous people do. And to make sure that stuff was wiped down, every bathroom was wiped down, the counters were wiped down. We were just being ultra hopefully smelled like Clorox, but it was okay. But she and I have always clicked, and we've always had a great friendship. And wow, after I heard her whole story then, and she's got, a disabled young child that's just had all sorts of problems. And man, she just keeps persevering. So I after that episode, I was like, damn, girl, kudos to you. It's like, yeah, that really, really made an impact on me of she's so young, and what she'd already lived through. It was more than most people go through, in a lifetime. So that was super sweet.
So I'm gonna change gears here a little bit. We've been had some pretty heavy moments here, like going through emotional connections and stuff like that. But there are hilarious moments on screen, well, off screen for the most part.
Yeah.
What is the funniest moment that that's happened off mic during the podcast? I got one in the bank right here that I could share once you share here.
Okay. Well, the very first episode that we did, Ben, I don't think you were in on this one, but it took me 45 minutes to figure out something was not hooked up right with my computer, and you guys were literally, troubleshooting with me, and I'm on my hands and knees underneath my desk, replugging stuff in, rebooting, it took forever, and I don't know what it was. I can't even remember now what the one, thing was, but it was not hooked up right. And I thought and then I had to sit down and do that first episode, and I could just feel the sweat pouring down my face, my back. It was just like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember what I said in that episode, but because I was so rattled. And IT is not my forte, as y'all well know.
Well,
like Murphy's Law.
Well, speaking of IT, I think before this recording of speaking of things not connected and not working properly, as we're having you shoot on your phone because your keyboard and mouse aren't working. So it's kind of reminiscent of that first episode. There's the mouse.
Yeah.
That's what the next iteration of the Crucible podcast should be: overcoming IT challenges.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord have mercy. And any of my students that had me as a teacher, I mean, I just didn't, I finally ended up giving up. And it's like, does somebody know how to run this? Come up here and do it, Right. And that was pretty much my, theme for my whole entire teaching career. Because inevitably I would mess it up, or I'd have it working fine. And then, as today we go to start, and it's like, I can't even click on my email. I can't click on anything. So yes, we're on my phone. Thank goodness for iPhones. Yay.
There's, you are many things, MaryLee, many positive, great things, and resilient is one of them.
Oh,
for sure. You have produced many episodes about resilience. But can you think of a guest who stands out for their willpower and their resilience that's kind of reminiscent of your own?
Well, I'm not sure if it's reminiscent of my own, but resilience is definitely something that I think you have to learn. But Matt's interview, my interview with your brother, Matt Tompkins, and America's Addicted, I think was the title of his episode. And I had no idea any of that about Matt's backstory. And I was just flabbergasted because he just laid it out so factual and, like it was no big deal. And I just thought, wow, my hat's off to you, dude. And also Beth Brower, she lived in the tunnels in LA, was a high school graduate friend of mine. And she went to rehab 17 times. Wow. To get sober. And the 17th time, it finally clicked with her. I think she knew that she was going to die. If she didn't get through it this time, she was going to be dead. And that's pretty close to about what happened. So those were, just great stories to me. And they were revolved about, substance abuse and addiction. But also Dr. Clark Rausch, he talked about grieving, and he went through cancer, overcame it. And then his wife got cancer. And then 2 years later, she was gone, and how hard it's been. And, the first anniversary, I've gone through that with him, and the second anniversary of her death. And his students have been there for him. And he's just a fabulous person and teacher. But I thought, wow, his insights into grief and grieving were, spot on. I thought he should have written a book. And I hope he does. I've encouraged him. It's like, you need to put this down in writing, because there's so many people that, don't know how to grieve, or they just, push. So many people just stuff down, and I thought this was one instance where this guy clearly could have done that, and he didn't. And his resiliency was, he's still extremely successful and happy and, doing great. So I really respect him.
Yeah. And in order to build resiliency, you have to be faced with tons of challenges. And there have been tons of challenges that have been shared across across your podcast. In fact, one of the biggest challenges that podcasters face is they typically give up after 7 episodes.
Oh, wow.
You're 2 seasons in with, I from the audio, I don't even know, might be around 100 episodes. I want to say. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I've just been staring at in between you and Ben right now. But what has been your biggest challenge during this podcast journey, and how did you overcome it?
Well, my goal was simply from the beginning to help people, and it was never about the downloads, but Yeah, I've only done, so this will be my 31st, I think, episode that you guys have edited. And it was never about the downloads, even though God really blessed me. And I don't know, I've had over 15,000 downloads. I think you told me, well, Matt told me that we averaged over 500 per episode, which was just shocking to me because I thought, when I did, I thought, well, I'm just going to throw this out there. And if it helps somebody, then yay, be blessed. That's kind of has been my whole thought process. And, but no, I'm sorry, I lost track. Your question was what again, Martin?
Well, overcoming it. You're facing biggest challenges during it. So, probably I would say transitioning at least from the audibles side to the video side more than likely, and then laying out that structure probably, right? Yeah,
exactly. And just all the equipment and making sure I know how it works and what's supposed to be hooked up, and it is all hooked up. But yeah, for some reason my mouse, even though I put a new battery in it, it's not working. But and also the makeup, because I did quite a bit of study and background on what kind of makeup do you need to be on on a camera, and I completely changed everything. I almost I still have some of the stuff I use, but it was all too greasy looking, and lots of serum, and it's supposed to make you look, glowing. Well, it just makes you look like a, greasy pig live, on a video. So that was really interesting to me. And I watched several tutorials about how to do it, but ironically, I've gotten a lot of compliments since then. People will come up to me and go, wow, your makeup's just amazing, or it's perfect. In fact, this last weekend at convention, I had several women come up to me, can I take my picture with you? And it was like, it was just it was almost embarrassing. But the resiliency part for me, in doing this has been what should be my next topic, what should be my next episode, because I wasn't necessarily trying to top, that one or top this one, so that was probably the hardest thing. It's like, I'm blank. I'd ask my husband for suggestions, and sometimes I'd listen to him, and oftentimes I didn't. So, but at least gave me an idea of where to head, and what to pick. And I tried to pick things that were on my heart at the time that I could share with listeners. Because if you're authentic, I think that comes through more than anything.
Mm-hmm. You talked about, the downloads increasing as the podcast went on, and downloads aren't everything when it comes to podcasting. Your consumption rate, how long people are listening, also was pretty consistent. And I think the thing that people listen to, and this is true no matter what podcast it is, and really no matter what medium it is, but engaging storytelling and having engaging guests on and an engaging host. And I think that that's something that you've always brought to this podcast is the sense of engagement and pulling people in. Can you tell us about a moment with one of those guests and their story that maybe shocked you or surprised you or caught you off guard? Something that the listener would say, well, I'm not going to get out of my car just yet. I'm going to finish listening to this podcast because I don't know where this is going and I want to find out more. Can you think of a guest that had that kind of a story?
Well, I've shared many of them. Probably one I didn't mention was, excuse me, Maggie Malone, and how she came from small town America. We had less than 200 kids in our high school, and I was very fortunate to be able to be her vocal music teacher. And she was a 2-time Olympian, and she went to the Rio Olympics, and she felt like she kind of froze. She didn't do very well. I think she was in the top 20 maybe or so. And so how she had come back, and her whole story of just going on about how she figured out basically to pick herself up. She's on the world stage and what she needed to do. And she said she needed to have like a Marvel team or like a team of superheroes. So she hired a nutritionist, a guy that just dealt with technique and trained with him, moved to the area where this guy lived. A weightlifter, a person that dealt with just there's, the psychological aspect of sports and when you do well, when you don't well, and all of that. And she had 6 or 7 different people. And I thought, that is a fabulous idea. I thought I need to do this for myself. I was just kind of slack-jawed. And she, she's all of 24. And I thought, wow, this such wisdom, and she'd already done her second Olympic and, and she'd won the USA. She still holds the USA record in javelin. And, it was just such a good story of here she is from nowhere in Nebraska. And, and she kept going, so that one kept my interest as well. Yeah. But I think Beth Brower's, when she told about all the horrors of living in Vegas and living in the, basically she's living on the street, but she's in those tunnels. And she didn't share all the terrible things that happened to her, but she told me, and I was mortified to think, wow, okay, when you're desperate, you'll do anything, kind of a deal. Yeah.
So we've talked about challenges that you face, the resiliency of building, being resilient, and some of your experiences with the podcast host. What has been the most rewarding part? If you could pick one thing, what has been the most rewarding part about creating Crucible Champions Women's Faith in Fitness?
For me, it's all about the faith and the healing that I've received through this, but also just realizing that, had it not been for my faith, and that I hope came across in every episode, maybe not some more than others, but without my faith, I'd be nothing.
Well, MaryLee, I don't want to say as we conclude this final episode, because there may be future episodes.
Oh, there will be. There will be.
This will be just a momentary hiatus, a little break as we collect ourselves. But up until this point, you've covered so much. You've interviewed so many amazing guests. You've had such an amazing journey yourself. We've had an amazing journey producing your show.
Yeah, thank you.
What would you like your listeners to remember most about this journey and the podcast?
I think mainly that people aren't alone. And I think with COVID, it changed our world. And I have found that everything that I have felt or said on this episode, on an episode or whatever in preparation, I feel like it's been, echoed back to me in so many different ways that, you're not alone. It's not your fault. Trust in God, and, you'll be able to get through it. So
that's a great message.
Yeah, and fortunately, everyone can go back and cycle through. This podcast will be available, continue to be available through however long servers exists. Right. So that's the fortunate thing. But apart from that, I'll let you lead us out here, MaryLee.
Well, thank you so much, you guys. Honestly, I just love and appreciate both of you and Matt. And a special shout out to Brett Wetton, because he's encouraged me to even do this. And I never would have done it had he not said something to me. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should do that, But I just want to say thank you to everybody and for all your hard work and your patience while stuff went wrong on my end. And I just want to tell everybody, God bless, and, have a fantastic life.
This income testimonial is not representative of the average earnings that coaches achieve with Optavia. Only a very small number of coaches will achieve income that is within the range of this testimonial. Optavia makes no guarantee of financial success. Success with Optavia results only from successful sales efforts, which require hard work, diligence, skill, persistence, competence, and leadership. Please see the Optavia income disclosure statement for statistics on actual earnings of coaches. In a clinical study, the group on the Optimal Weight 5-in-1 plan lost 10 times more weight than the self-directed group. Average weight loss for clients on the Optimal Weight 5-in-1 plan is 12 pounds. References include Dr. A's Habits of Health book by Wayne Scott Anderson, Your Life Book by Wayne Scott Anderson. The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership by Jem Diethmer, Diana Chapman, and Kaylee Warner-Klemp. Lifelong Transformation, One Healthy Habit at a Time. Optimal Weight, 5-in-1 Plan. Optimal Weight, 3-in-3 Plan. Optavia, the 4 components of our system. Optavia Coach, The Habits of Health Transformational System, Your Life Book by Dr. Wayne Scott Anderson.